Well, hi, hello, how are you, everyone? Welcome to today's exciting episode of Flashback with Wes Britton, where you get to hear me and my co host, Karina Kansas, interview stars, entertainment insiders, and entertainers from every variety from times past, present, and future. So kick back, enjoy this next hour, and thanks for stopping by.
Groucho, Chico, Harpo, Gummo, Zeppo, Daylight Come. Oh, sorry, getting carried away there. Hello, folks. This is Wes Britton here. And from that little introduction, you can probably surmise what the subject of our next interview is going to be. Now, if you're like me, you probably mourn the days when we had comedy ensembles and comedy troupes that we just don't see anymore. I don't really count Saturday Night Live because it seems like every performer there wants to get on, get off, and have a solo career. Everybody wants that solo name. We don't have Monty Pythons or Second City Televisions anymore, or going back further in time to those classic teams like the Three Stooges and the Marx Brothers. And our next guest, well, we can't find anybody who has more of an inside story as to what was going on with those zany brothers than, well, his name should give it away, Bill Marx. And what we're going to be talking about is his new book from Bear Manor Media called Son of Harpo Speaks, which I think is pretty cool. Right now you can pick up a print copy of it from the Bear Manor website, and we'll talk more about that later. But he's also got an audio version coming out, read by the man himself. What will you find in that book? Well, let's find out now by bringing on stage my new friend, Bill Marxo. Hey, Bill.
How are you? Nice to talk with you, Wes. I'll tell you what you'll find about my book. You'll find you're $25 less than you had before.
Well, if I spent my $25, what am I going to catch inside? Well, I guess the print version and audio versions are slightly different, aren't they?
They're actually different in only one way. The text is the same, although I've added a few stories in the audio book. The reason that the audio book has rare recordings that nobody's ever heard, some rare recordings, and the fact that I do a pretty good intimation of my dad's voice. In fact, I do a very good intimation of his voice. I have visitations from him throughout the book. Aside from that, the reason that I have all of these rare recordings is because there are no photographs in the audio book. And in the regular book, there's 170 formerly unpublished photographs that are quite wonderful, but I had to replace them with something, so I went to these family recordings, certain things, and that really spice up the book. I do the narration, I do Dad's voice, and I do all the other voices in the book itself. So it's unique in its own way.
That sounds pretty good. What inspired you to write a book? Because, of course, the whole story of the Marx Brothers has been chronicled before, and, of course, your dad did his own book called Harpo Speaks. What got you into the writing bug?
Frankly, Groucho had two siblings that wrote about him. Chico had a sibling that wrote about him, but Harpo never did. And so I decided that I would create the trifecta and write about Dad. The book is really more about my very, very special relationship with him as a father-son and a professional relationship that we had together. He ordained me as his arranger-conductor. I'm a musician, and at the age of 16 years old, and we worked together for 12 solid years until his passing, and I did all of his arrangements for all of the things you see on TV. Not the ones that are in the movies. They came quite before me. Dad was 50 years older than I was, so we had a unique relationship. and I'm probably the last vertical vaudevillian you'll ever see in your life. I'm a participant in the British vaudeville circuit. Back in 1949, I was 12 years old, and I went and I worked with Dad on stage. We did the London Palladium and all of those things, and I chronicle that in the book about how he gave me a real taste of what that wonderful thing that you were talking about earlier, vaudeville, that spawned all of these marvelous acts that stayed together. Like the brothers were 20 years in vaudeville before they ever even got to Broadway, and another 5 years before you ever saw them in a movie. So it gave me a real taste and an understanding of what vaudeville is all about. And I'm probably the last person in the world now that has ever worked with all three Marx brothers.
And your family tree isn't limited to the Marx brothers. You had a rather famous mother, too, didn't you?
Well, I was famous for, if nothing else, what she would tell you would be a movie called $1 Million Legs, which was originally written for the Marx brothers, but the brothers turned it down, and so Herman Mankiewicz made a movie made it into a movie featuring some of the great character actors of all time at that time, and that was Jack Oakey, Andy Clyde, W.C. Fields, Ben Turpin, Hugh Herbert, and of course the Billy the Sneeze Gilbert, and and the Lita Rivera, and of course my mother, who played the leading lady, the daughter of W.C. Fields. It's a great movie, but my mother made 3 times as many movies. Excuse me.
And her name was Susan Marx. I'm not sure we made that clear yet.
No, we haven't done that yet. But
Susan Fleming before she married her dad, yeah.
That was what she wound up with. She changed her name just like all of the brothers did. Her original name was Susan Fleming, and she wasn't Susan Marx until she married Dad. She was in almost three times as many motion pictures as the brothers made. She was a contract player for Paramount Warners, and she hated being in show business. She started out in the Ziegfeld Follies. Her mother pushed her into the movies, and she just wanted to get out and get married and have children and live and be happy for the rest of her life, which she ultimately did with my dad. And ironically, my father passed away in 1964 on the September 28th, on their 28th wedding anniversary. And they'd still be married today if he was alive and if she was alive.
Now, one thing about her, I thought that I spotted, at least in the research that I was looking through, she's the one who pursued him and proposed to him several times before he agreed to it, right?
Correct. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, he became the first American artist to perform behind what was to become the Iron Curtain by getting Alexander Woollcott, his close friend, to get him over to concertize in Russia just to get away from her, because
I didn't know that part.
Yeah. He was pushing the buttons, and he was a confirmed bachelor, but he knew that the jig was up, and he got away for a while. When he came back, there she was. She had fixed up a house that he had bought. She had done the complete makeover of the house, and there was no turning anywhere else. So
he couldn't stay behind the Iron Curtain to get away from her.
Well, you see, it still took him about 2.5 years before he succumbed. But he was there in 1933 between motion pictures, between, I believe it was Horse Feathers and then Duck Soup. Duck Soup is the only movie that he made where he did not have a harp solo in it, largely because he was over in Russia concertizing at that time between movies. They didn't have time to prepare for a new work, for duck soup. But Susan was a remarkable lady. She, after Dad passed away, she turned to public service. She was not interested in remarrying, and she became on the board of the school board of Palm Springs, California, on and off 35 years of public service. Was quite a wonderful lady and quite a character. She would be able to, some people say things that are intended to be funny, and they are, and other people say things that are not intended to be funny, and they are. And my mother is the latter. We were coming out of a restaurant one day, and a lady tapped her on the shoulder, and my mom turned around, and the lady said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I thought you were somebody else." And my mother said, "Well, I am." I mean, she was very honest about everything. She was a terrific lady, and the two of them were really quite a couple. And I am so grateful because in my book, I have two separate stories. The one that chronicles my relationship with Dad and Mom, and another story which is entirely different and very, very strange, on how I came to be a part of their lives.
Well, that's true. You and your three siblings were all adopted by your mom and dad, right?
That is correct. And I was a fellow by the name of James Clapperich for the first 14 months of my life, until they came into it and changed my name. So but it's the way in which it occurred that is so fascinating, because I never had any interest in pursuing who my birth parents were at all, and it came about in such a freaky manner that I felt that I should include it in my autobiography, and because it's part of my life, Well,
of course, in your family tree, there's an awful lot of name changing going on. Like your dad was born Adolf, and then changed his name to Arthur, and then, of course, became Harpo. How did all that come about?
Well, on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, in the turn of the 20th century, Adolf was the name Dad was born with, but he hated the name, and this was long before the rise of the Nazis. He just never liked it, but they all had nicknames in those days, and the nickname for Adolf was Oddie, O-D-D-I-E. Hey, Oddie, come on over here. Let's go play some stickball. Hey, Oddie, what are you doing? And he noticed that the nickname for Arthur was Oddie, A-R-T-I-E. Hey, Oddie, come on over here and play some stickball. Hey, Oddie. And Oddie sounded exactly alike, so he decided to change his name to Arthur.
How did it come about? Well, let's see. You must know your uncles intimately well. What kind of family relationship did the four boys have off screen? No, 4 or 5.
Yeah, 5 of them. Well, they were bonded. They were bonded all of their life. Through thick and thin, they had a magical loyalty. As a matter of fact, I would have to say that that was the one thing that kept them together, because, Zeppo for a while became a professional gambler when he quit the movies, and Chico was always gambling and always having problems with women, and in spite of all of that, they hung together completely. I would have to say that out of the 5, Gummo and my dad were the ones that were the least insane of the brothers. My dad was a remarkable human being in that, just like the others, though, he lived life. He didn't live his life according to how he thinks other people should think of him. He grabbed it by the throat and lived impulsively and beautifully, had a clear channel to himself. And was a person who never harmed anybody and died without an enemy, and he was just an amazing person that had a full life in the 76 years he was here. He lived 150 years, you know. And the Groucho, of course, was very troubled anytime he wasn't working. He was a performing seal, and he loved to be in front of people, in front of audiences, entertain them. And when he wasn't, he was dead man walking, didn't know what to do with himself. And he was a frustrated author. So Groucho had a lot and had trouble with really relating to women. Chico was an inveterate gambler and womanizer, and Zeppo was quite a character. He was one of the funniest people that ever lived, although you'd never know it.
He's always playing the straight man.
Yeah, but whenever Groucho got sick on stage or whenever they were doing it, Zeppo would take over Groucho's particular role. And Zeppo was a great raconteur, a terrific guy, but he was a crazy man. He was a gambleraholic who would go to a ball game and bet which pitch is going to come over the plate, a fastball or a curve, or whether it would be a ball or a strike, or whether it would be a foul. He would bet on every pitch. I mean, he was a lunatic that way. I mean, so Dad was mostly at peace with himself, and Gummo was an easygoing kind of guy who never wanted to be in show business, and wound up being their personal manager.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how your dad shaped his stage persona, because in the beginning it was never intended that he'd be the, quote, silent partner, and he wasn't playing a harp in those days. How did his place in the ensemble evolve?
Well, their act was written by their uncle, who is Al Sheehan of Gallagher and Sheehan, very famous Broadway and vaudeville act of the early 20th century. And Uncle Al would write their various sketches for their vaudeville shows, and they were touring at one time, and one night Dad gave a performance. He had been doing some pantomime, but he'd been speaking and all of that. And the next day the review came out, and the guy said that Arthur Marx was brilliant as a pantomimist, but he destroyed his character every time he opened his mouth to speak. And that crushed my dad seriously. He was he didn't know what to do with himself. And what happened was that they stumbled upon, quite by accident, because he decided he was not going to speak again. He was just going to do the pantomime stuff, that they had come across a very famous formula that had been traced back to the 15th century. In fact, I think it's still a repertoire in New York called Commedia dell'arte, where you would have the authoritarian figure who Groucho assumed, the idiot, which Chico became, and the mime. And they found out, without realizing it, that it was a much funnier act with two people talking instead of three people talking. And that's how that all started. And Dad never spoke on stage again after that. They realized that this was a magical formula. And if you look into movies, rarely do you ever see Harpo work with Groucho alone. You'll see Groucho with Chico, you'll see Chico work with Dad, and then you'll see the three of them work together. But only on very rare occasions do Harpo and Groucho work separately. There are
it always seems like, Chico and Harpo were coming in together as like partners who were kind of at odds with the character that Groucho was playing.
Correct. Absolutely. That was their loosely knit formula for their movies.
Oh, yeah, because Harpo was either Rusty or Pinky or some other kind of name who was going to partner with Chico in some kind of shenanigan.
Hey, that's so good, the boss. I like it. Pinky. Hey, that's so good.
Yeah. You could do them all, can't you? Well, I also discovered, rooting around that, your dad didn't start off playing harp and taught himself, and in fact, he didn't really play harp technically correct, right?
That's how it started. His grandmother was a harpist in the old country, and when she came over from Alsace-Lorraine, she brought her harp, and Minnie, their mother, found out that a vaudeville act with a harp in it got $5 a week more than an act without a harp. So,
okay.
So Chico was already playing piano, and Groucho had the mandolin. So she sent Dad the harp that was in the house there that belonged to grandmother, and he started to practice. You know, he did the hunt and peck, search and destroy method, because he didn't take lessons. And he learned how to play accompaniment on the harp for a while. And it all worked out pretty nicely. You know, they were originally an act. They were a musical act that did some comedy. And ultimately, they became a comedy act that did some music. But they always had music in their shows, their movies, and everything. So it just flip-flopped after a while. They were originally the Four Nightingales, and they would sing and play and all of that, and do a little shtick. But suddenly, one time in Nacogdoches, Texas, it turned itself around, and it's chronicled in a lot of books about how all of a sudden they became maniacs on stage, and it turned into be a comedy act with music.
One thing I didn't realize until I was digging around is that all of the movies, well, not maybe all of them, but all the original movies started off as Broadway shows that they ended up filming as movies, right?
The first two motion pictures, The Coconuts and Animal Crackers, were Broadway successes. There was a Broadway success prior to that called I'll Say She Is, and then they did these two Broadway shows, and each one of them was filmed as the Broadway show on the Long Island sound stages in Astoria, and became their first two motion pictures. And subsequently, after the 29 crash, they moved to Hollywood and made their first motion picture intended solely for motion pictures, and that was Monkey Business. And they were crazy people. They had to be chained to their dressing rooms because they had never done a movie before, and they were always going somewhere or doing something. They would have to get Chico back from the racetrack or whatever they did. They were just nuts, and it was hard for them to hit their marks so that the cameramen would be able to get them in frame. I mean, it was really cool to have them starting in the movies. In 1931 was that particular movie, and the one that sent them out here was Animal Crackers, and it is being shown at various sketch fests in the country, one coming right up here in San Francisco. It's the 80th anniversary, believe it or not, of Animal Crackers, which came out in 1930. So it's pretty exciting that they still somehow or another are hopefully being truly introduced to the 21st century.
Well, this, of course, I can't think of many others you can say appeared in every entertainment venue possible. They were on stage, they were on film, they were on television, they were on radio. Did they ever miss a medium?
No, they never did. And amazing how many wonderful talents that came out of vaudeville and the stage. In order to ultimately make some money, they had to come to Hollywood and either make motion pictures or go into radio. Some of your famous vaudevillians like Jack Benny and Charlie McCarthy and Edgar Bergen and Burns and Allen and people like that had a tremendous career and learning experience in vaudeville, being able to work out their stuff and spend time together and develop something that was unique unto anything else. And they wound up in movies and radio. And then, of course, came television. And you would have some of those people still available mentally and physically for television. And we had Groucho with You Bet Your Life and the Burns and Allen show and the Jack Benny show and all those wonderful, unique personalities that came out of vaudeville. And that over a 50, 60-year period, they hit them all. You know, they really did. And we don't have that anymore. You were talking about the Monty Pythons and, you know, we don't stay together long enough anymore for an opportunity to develop a persona, an act persona. You don't have your Martin and Lewis's, which they came along pretty late, or the Smothers Brothers, and you know we just don't see that anymore because television eats up material right away. Everybody sees a joke or hears a joke, and that's the end of it. You can't do it again. But in those days, you could work those jokes and make them happen and use them all around the country. But nowadays, you just go on television and you're around the country in a half hour. So we don't have, and I love the Comedy Channel, but I just don't see uniqueness like we had once in show business.
What was it like to grow up in a household with all of the zaniness that was out there on the road? Did any of that come back into your kitchen and the living room of the Marx household?
Well, it's something that you would think would be so. However, my dad was a very, very wonderfully sober kind of guy. The brothers, they all, by that time that each one had families, and I'm the eldest of the four children that Harpo and Susan adopted, and Dad was already 50 years older than I was, and so my relationship to him was a father-son relationship. Ultimately, I became his father, and he became my son. As the time went on, I looked after him. He had a couple of heart attacks, and I was real close to him in the sense that there wasn't a lot of zaniness going on anymore in terms of the brothers because they were up in years, and they all had their own families that they went home to. They did have a place that they went to every day, just about. It was a place called Hillcrest Country Club, and that's where they had lunch. And they had lunch at a round table, which was called a Round Table West, and it had all of your great vaudeville comics there, George Jessel, George Burns, Groucho, and Danny Kaye, and all of those people would have lunch every day. So the brothers were there and saw each other every day and then dispersed to their own families in the evening. So we really didn't have a lot of zaniness, as one might think, because my dad was up in years by the time any of us were completely, aware of how loony these guys had been all of their life.
Now, do I have this correct? Was your own TV debut on that very famous Ed Murrow person-to-person broadcast where back in those days he would have a camera go to somebody's home and he'd interview them from his studios? Was that the first time America saw you?
I would bet it probably was. I might have been in something a little bit before that or after that. I don't really remember, but I can tell you that I chronicle it in Son of Harpo Speaks, my book. His book is called Harpo Speaks, and that's why I called mine Son of Harpo Speaks.
It fits in several ways there.
Yeah, right, or The Return of Harpo Speaks, or Harpo Speaks, the motion picture, or whatever. But anyway, in the days in the 50s, there was a marvelous series called Person to Person, and the interviewer was Edward R. Murrow, and they would come to a venue, and they would set up one day, and then they would shoot the next day. And they came in and made my dad's house, which he built and called El Rancho Harpo. He made that a sound stage. The people from CBS, it was done for them. And Murrow was in New York on a feed that we could not see, but he could see us. And what happened was they would come in and he would ask questions, and Dad and Mom would answer, and the whole family was there. It was probably the most wonderful bonding a family could possibly have, in my lifetime anyway, and it was just marvelous. The show also had the Kennedys and at another time, and they had Groucho at another time, and they had Orson Welles and Frank Sinatra at another time. It was really quite an extraordinary show, and it's very valuable, and I would imagine it would be available to see somewhere on a DVD.
I have to look around and see on that, because I was rooting around looking for it, to be honest, and I could see all these lists of your dad's various appearances, and I didn't see that listed anywhere, and I thought, well, that's surprising, because I sure remember, because it opens up very cleverly, where Ed Murrow introduces the family, and nobody answers him, playing off your dad's silent persona, and then it was a very warm and human, I thought, exchange that happened after that.
Well, I will tell you one thing. Excuse me, Wes. If anybody ever gets to see that show, it will probably help to realize and to know Harpo outside of the normal Harpo that we know. He was a remarkably human family man in that segment. He was he was the guy that I knew. He was just plain Dad in that segment, and I think that I've heard people say, "Gee, I wish I had really gotten to know your dad," And I said, "Well, if you watch this, you'll get to know him pretty well as to who he really was, and outside of the stage persona."
Interesting. Well, how did it come about that you took to the stage? Because you're a pianist and composer in your own right?
Well, I tried to avoid music quite a bit. I took piano lessons. I hated that. I didn't like the discipline. But when I was 2 years old, and incidentally, they recorded me when I was 2 years old. They had a old Victrola, those things with the steel the needles. And
huge needles, yeah.
Yeah, they were huge, and they recorded me singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." It happens to be in my audio version of Son of Harpo Speaks. I've got a lot of rare stuff like that, and they knew I had musical talent. They didn't push me too hard, and ultimately I was involved in music by the time I was 14 or 15, and Dad made me his musical director, and I did the arranging for him on all of his television appearances, and we did 2 albums for Mercury Records together, and we had a very special relationship that started out with music. quite frankly, and ultimately I went to Juilliard School of Music and studied composition, and I've spent most of my life either composing for motion pictures, television, and or symphonic works, and the rest of the time playing jazz piano in seedy nightclubs all over the United States of America and through the republic for which it stands.
On what films and television series can people get a chance to hear your music?
Most of them are defunct now, and for very good reason. I worked on this Tonight Show, for example, the television. I did. If you want to date me, I can go back to Donna Reed's show, the Dan Raven show, the Love Boat. I did episodic for Starsky and Hutch. Did a lot of television stuff, but I did a number of motion pictures. Many of them were horror films, like vampires and stuff like, because a tremendous affinity for contemporary music such as Bartok and Stravinsky, and I wanted to write some far-out music, which was in my blood at the time when I was in my 20s. And so the only way you could do that was to enlist yourself in doing horror films, and then you could write weird stuff, and that was great. I went through that phase and came out of it and wound up starting to write symphonic works and stuff.
So what are you doing these days? Because I guess you have been working with your dad, of course, for decades. Are you retired? Are you still composing? Are you still playing?
Well, having just finished this audio book, which took more time than I thought it would, I'm getting back into playing some piano. I enjoy playing piano now for people more than anything else that I could ever think of wanting to do in my life. I don't play classically, though I write it. But I love playing, the Great American Songbook and blowing a little jazz, bebop, and stuff like that. And I enjoy that more than anything else because I enjoy a live audience and live performance. So I'm going to try to resurrect myself and reinvent the concept of going out there and playing to the fourth wall and getting myself back involved in music. I'll never retire. I don't believe in retirement for myself. I don't know, maybe other people like to retire, but I don't think as a creative human being, which I consider myself to be, I don't think that I could ever retire because it's just not my nature. I don't want to walk away from music, and I've been doing a lot of stand-up, public speaking. I do a show that I go around and I do book signings, but I do an hour-and-a-half show where I'm a stand-up comic, and then I sit down and I play, and then I get up and I sit down and I stand up and I sit down, and then the audience stands up and walks out.
Can you share us a sample? Is there any current bit you're doing that?
Well, I'm more of a storyteller with a punchline. And it really relates a great deal to the beautiful things that happened in vaudeville that have been related to me by my dad, and then of course some of the wacky things that have happened to me in my lifetime. Having been an accompanist as well as a pianist for many years at a place called Dino's Lodge, where you singers on their way up and on their way down. I never forget one night I played an accompaniment for a guy who forgot the lyrics to try to remember.
There's a song you don't want to forget, I don't think.
You're absolutely right. Oh, that's just an example of some of the things I'm able to laugh about now that maybe I couldn't once before. There was a guy with 10 pinky rings and a white suit. He came in to a club I was working one night. He went up to the band. He says, hey, I want to do Skin. I said, Skin? What do you mean? Come on, Skin. You know Skin. I said, well, he said, I got you under my skin. I said, oh, really? Yeah. Yes, of course. Well, fine. What key do you do it in? How the hell do I know what key I do it in? I'm not a professional. And I said, very honestly, I said, well, I realize you're not, but we have to have the... And he says, you're calling me a non-professional, you son of... And he jumped up onto the stage and started pummeling me.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And fortunately, we had a bouncer that came in and extricated himself from my throat and threw him out.
All right. Well,
that was wonderful recollections.
Well, one thing we've got to do, Bill, is make sure that all the listeners out there know how they can track down your book. It's
a Bear Manor Media and Bear Manor Audio, which is now the new website as for the audio section. They're doing a lot of audio books of some of the most famous people that nobody's ever heard of, just like me. And you can get it there. You can also go to my website, sonofharpospeaks.com. It's all one word, sonofharpospeaks.com. You'll see my smiling face there along with my dad, and you can purchase it from there if you want. I'm happy to autograph anything that comes along my way. My book is $25 autographed and $30 unautographed.
For that, I think I'll pay the $25 and fake it.
I think the download is $25 now on Bear Manor Audio, if I'm not mistaken. But that's not too bad nowadays, even in our dark economic climate that we have. That's not really bad, because my audio book is 10, count them, 10 discs, 9.5 hours worth of mirth and merriment. And I think you really have a wonderful time with it at your leisure. And then you can always write me a note about how much you hated or loved it at sonofharpospeaks.com.
All right. That sounds like a perfect way to wrap things up here, because we're pretty much out of time. So I've got to say, Bill, this is absolutely one of my favorite, and I think one of the most delightful interviews we've had. And I certainly hope folks do get out there and check out the book and check out the website and spend some time with the Marx family.
Well, I want to thank you for having me on your show. I love what you folks are doing, and you're as much a part of the entertainment community as all of the people who we've talked about today. And I want to thank you for thinking of me, and let's do it again sometime.
I like that idea very much.
I got a few more stories for you.
Well, excellent. Well, I'll write that down right here and say it again. Thanks, Bill, for agreeing to appear.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. Don't forget that all past shows are archived on the Artist First Radio Network. And join us next week for another exciting episode of Flashback.